The galaxy had known peace for 2,000 years, and in all that time, humanity had been the quiet neighbor that nobody feared when the Terran Collective first joined the Galactic Council. In the year 2847, the elder races looked at humans with a mix of curiosity and arrogance. They saw a young species, barely capable of traveling between stars, filled with strange emotions and unpredictable behavior. The Vorath hegemony, rulers of 300 worlds, called humans the loud children of the galaxy, and laughed at their simple ships and basic weapons. The Kathmari Collective, ancient beings of pure thought, barely acknowledged human existence at all. But humans did something that surprised everyone. They followed the rules. They traded fairly with every species they met. They settled their disputes through the Council's courts. They even reduced their military fleets as a sign of good faith and trust. Over the centuries, humanity spread across 47 colony worlds, building farms and cities and schools. They became merchants and scientists and teachers. They married aliens and raised mixed families. They became part of the galactic community in every way, and the Council grew comfortable with them. Ambassador Lyra Chun stood in the great chamber of Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council, presenting humanity's annual tribute to the gathered representatives of 12 elder species. She was a tall woman with silver hair and kind eyes, and she had spent 30 years building bridges between Earth and the stars behind her. Holographic displays showed humanity's gifts, new medicines developed on Mars, music composed on the ocean world of Pacifica, technologies that could help struggling colonies survive harsh winters. The PSV representatives watched with bored expressions on their alien faces. High Arbiter Keth, volume of the Vorath hegemony, sat on his throne of black stone, his 4 eyes half closed with disinterest. His scales were the color of dried blood, and his claws tapped against the armrest with impatience. The Terran Collective thanks the Council for another year of peace and partnership, Lyra said. A voice steady and warm. Keth volume made a sound that might have been a laugh. Yes, he said, waving one clawed hand. The humans are grateful as always. You may leave now, Ambassador. Lyra bowed and walked out of the chamber with her head held high, but inside her heart felt heavy. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, but she did not know what it was. She could not have known that 3 days earlier, the Council had held a secret meeting in a sealed chamber deep beneath the surface of Nexus Prime. The 12 elder species had voted on Resolution 7742, a document that would change the galaxy forever. They called it the Genetic Reclamation Act. The elder races had grown old and stagnant. Their bodies no longer evolved. Their minds no longer produced new ideas. They had reached the end of their biological potential, and they were afraid, but humanity was different. Human genes were wild and unpredictable, constantly changing and adapting. Some human children were born with strange abilities, the power to sense thoughts, to move objects with their minds, to see glimpses of the future. These children were rare, perhaps 1 in a million, but the Council wanted them. They wanted to study them, to take them apart and learn their secrets, to use their gifts for the benefit of the elder races. And so Resolution 7742 gave the Council permission to collect human children with special genetic markers and bring them to research facilities across the galaxy. The vote was 11-1. Only the ancient Ithril voted against it, but their objection was recorded and ignored on the colony world of New Helsinki, far from the politics of Nexus Prime. A boy named Marcus Webb was playing in the snow. He was 12 years old, with messy brown hair and a gap-toothed smile. He loved building snow forts and throwing snowballs at his little sister Emma. He had no idea that deep inside his brain, something special was growing. Something the Council wanted very badly. His mother called him inside for dinner, and he ran toward the warm lights of their small house. His boots crunching in the fresh powder, he never made it to the door. The sky turned dark as massive ships descended through the clouds. They were Vorath military vessels, painted in the black and red colors of the hegemony. Searchlights swept across the colony, and armored soldiers dropped from the sky on pillars of blue flame. Marcus froze in terror as 3 soldiers landed around him. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Target confirmed, one of them said into a communicator. Genetic markers positive. Preparing for extraction, Marcus screamed for his mother. Across the colony, other children were being taken. Parents fought back with whatever they had. Kitchen knives, farming tools, their bare hands. But the Vorath soldiers were too strong, too fast, too well armed in the end. 43 children were taken from New Helsinki alone, and New Helsinki was just one of 47 worlds. The operation happened simultaneously across human space. Council ships appeared without warning, took what they wanted, and vanished into the darkness between stars by the time the emergency transmissions reached Earth. 15,000 human children had disappeared. Lyra Chen was still on Nexus Prime when she received the news. She read the report 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. Her hands trembled as she requested an emergency audience with the Council High Arbiter. HFY did not even try to hide what they had done. The children are now property of the Galactic Council, he said calmly. They will be well cared for in our research facilities. Humanity should be honored that their offspring will contribute to the advancement of galactic civilization. Lyra stared at him, her face pale with shock and rage. You stole our children, she whispered. We exercised our legal authority under Resolution 7742. HFY replied. It was all done properly, I assure you. Now please, Ambassador, do not make this difficult. Accept the situation and move forward. It is the civilized thing to do. Lyra turned and walked out of the chamber without another word as she boarded her ship back to Earth. She sent a single encrypted message to the Terran Parliament. They have taken our children. They believe we will do nothing. They are wrong. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake, and it did not even know it yet. For 2,000 years, humanity had chosen peace. They had buried their weapons and forgotten their wars. They had trusted the galaxy to treat them fairly. That trust was now broken beyond repair somewhere in the darkness of space. 15,000 children cried for their parents, and the stars themselves seemed to grow cold with the promise of what was coming. The age of peace was over. The age of reckoning was about to begin. The first response from humanity was not fire or fury or threats of war. It was silence within 24 hours of the abductions. Every human diplomat in the galaxy stopped answering their communications. Every human trader closed their shops and locked their doors. Every human scientist packed their equipment and left there. Laboratories without a word. The vast network of human merchant ships that carried goods between 17 different civilizations simply stopped moving. They sat in their hangars, engines cold, crews refusing all orders to fly. The Council had never seen anything like it. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries suddenly collapsed. Medicines that only humans knew how to make became impossible to find. Technologies that depended on human maintenance began to fail. The Kethmari Collective, who had not eaten fresh food in 400 years because they relied on human supply ships, sent a desperate message to Earth asking what was happening. Earth did not reply. On the frontier world of Sigma 7, Admiral Jonathan Drake received the news of the abductions aboard his flagship, the DS Prometheus. He was an old man with white hair and a face carved from stone by 50 years of military service. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, cold and clear and seeing everything. When his communications officer read him the list of taken children, Drake sat perfectly still in his command chair. His officers watched him nervously, waiting for orders, waiting for some sign of what they should do. Then they reached the name Emma Drake, age 12. Taken from New Helsinki, the Admiral closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, Something had changed. The cold in his gaze had become ice, and the ice had become something far more dangerous. Set course for Earth, he said quietly. Maximum speed. Sir, his first officer asked carefully, what are our orders when we arrive? Drake looked out at the stars, his hands folded in his lap. We are going to wake up the sleeping dragon, he said on Earth. The Terran Parliament met for the first time in 300 years. The Great Hall had been built long ago for emergencies that everyone hoped would never come. Dust covered the ancient seats, and the lights flickered as old systems struggled to power up. But the representatives who gathered there were not dusty or old. They were parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters of the children who had been stolen. Prime Minister David Okonkwo stood at the center podium, his dark face tight with controlled emotion. The Galactic Council has taken 15,000 of our children, he said, his voice echoing through the silent hall. They did this legally under their own laws. Laws we had no voice in creating. Laws we never agreed to follow. He paused, looking around at the gathered faces. For 2,000 years, we have been peaceful. We have been patient. We have been everything the galaxy asked us to be. And this is how they repay us. A woman in the front row stood up. Her name was Dr. Sarah Webb, and her son Marcus was among the taken. What are we going to do about it? She demanded, her voice breaking with grief, and Raja Okonkwo took a deep breath. That is why I have called this vote, he said. I am asking Parliament to authorize the activation of Project Prometheus. A gasp ran through the hall. Project Prometheus was a legend, a ghost story that parents told their children, a whispered rumor that most people believed was fiction. It was said that when humanity first joined the Council, a small group of leaders had looked at the galaxy and seen not friends, but potential enemies. They had smiled and shaken hands and signed treaties of peace. But in secret, they had prepared for the worst, deep beneath the mountains of old Switzerland, behind doors of steel and stone that had not opened in 2,000 years. They had built weapons, not simple guns or missiles, but technology so advanced that even the elder races would tremble before them. Generation after generation of engineers had worked in those hidden facilities, improving and perfecting, driven by a single thought passed down through the centuries. Never again would humanity be helpless. Never again would they depend on the mercy of others. The official record said that humanity had disarmed. The truth was far more complicated. Project Prometheus is real, Okonkwo confirmed. It has always been real. And it is ready. The vote was unanimous 3 days later. The blast doors of the Swiss facility opened for the first time since they had been sealed. Admiral Drake walked through corridors that smelled of recycled air and old secrets. Around him, engineers and soldiers moved with quiet purpose, activating systems that had waited patiently for this moment. He entered a vast underground hangar and stopped, his breath catching in his throat. Before him stood the true fleet of humanity, thousands of warships, each one a masterpiece of deadly engineering. Their hulls were black as the void between stars, and their weapons bristled like the spines of angry creatures. These were not the simple patrol boats that humanity showed to the galaxy. These were predators, built for one purpose, and one purpose only: how long until we can deploy? Drake asked. 72 hours, Admiral. A young officer replied. Drake nodded slowly. Send a message to the Vorath hegemony, he said. Tell them they have 1 week to return our children. Every day they delay, the cost will increase. And if they refuse, sir? Drake turned to look at the officer, and for a moment, the young man saw something ancient and terrible in the Admiral's eyes. Something that had been passed down through human blood since the first caveman picked up a rock to defend his family. Then we will teach them what humanity really is, Drake said. The Vorath received the message and laughed. I-Arbiter Kethvolume called it the barking of a small dog and ordered his fleet to increase patrols around. Vorath space a week later. His reconnaissance fleet vanished without a trace near the edge of human territory. 40 ships, 10,000 soldiers. Gone in an instant with no distress signal, no wreckage. Nothing. Keth Volume sent a second fleet to investigate. They found only silence and empty space, for the first time in his long life. The High Arbiter felt something unfamiliar crawling up his spine. It was fear, and on Nexus Prime, the capital of the Galactic Council, the lights suddenly went out. Every system failed at once, plunging the entire planet into darkness. In that darkness, a single transmission played on every screen and speaker across the world. A human voice speaking in calm and measured tones. "You took our children. Now we will take everything." The message repeated once, twice, 3 times, and then the screens went dark again. The Age of Reckoning had begun. The war began not with a declaration, but with a demonstration. The Bios. The demonstration. The war began not with a declaration, but with a demonstration. With a demonstration. The Beyond. Galactic Council's primary communication station orbited a dead moon at the center of known space. It was a massive structure, larger than most cities, protected by 3,000 defense platforms, and considered completely impossible to destroy. Humanity destroyed it in 3 seconds. Admiral Drake's fleet emerged from slipspace without warning, appearing from nowhere like ghosts stepping out of a wall. The defense platforms had no time to react before strange new weapons tore them apart. The Council had never seen directed singularity warheads, weapons that created tiny black holes and aimed them at enemy ships. They had never experienced temporal disruption fields that slowed time around a target until it crumbled into dust. They had never faced enemies who moved faster than thought and struck harder than gods. The communication station vanished in a flash of light so bright that it could be seen from 3 star systems away, and then Drake's fleet was gone, slipping back into the darkness as quickly as they had appeared across the galaxy. Council species received the same message. Humanity was no longer asking for their children back. Humanity was coming to take them. The Vorath hegemony scrambled to respond. High Arbiter Keth Volume ordered every available ship to defend their homeworld, creating a wall of steel and fire that he believed nothing could penetrate. 3 days later, Admiral Drake's fleet appeared above Vorath Prime. His transmission was broadcast on every frequency, in every language. "You have 72 hours to return our children. Every hour of delay will cost you a city. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a promise." Keth Volume laughed at the message, though his laughter sounded hollow even to his own ears. He ordered his orbital defense grid to destroy the human fleet. The grid was the finest in the galaxy, built over thousands of years and upgraded with every new technology. It had repelled invasions from 6 different species and never failed it. Lasted 9 minutes against the human assault. Drake's ships moved through the Vorath defenses like wolves through a flock of sheep. They dodged and weaved and struck with impossible precision. Plasma fire that should have destroyed them passed through empty space, as the human vessels simply were not there anymore. When the last defense platform fell, Drake waited. 72 hours passed, and no children were returned. On the 73rd hour, the capital city of Vorath Prime ceased to exist. It was there one moment and gone the next, replaced by a crater so deep that lava bubbled up from the planet's core. Keth Volume screamed orders at his surviving commanders, but there was nothing they could do. Their weapons could not hit the human ships. Their shields could not stop human attacks. Their soldiers could not even see the enemy before they died hour by hour, city by city. The Vorath paid the price of their arrogance. The Council called emergency sessions that dissolved into chaos. The 12 elder species blamed each other for the disaster. The Kethmari Collective argued that they should surrender immediately. The Synth Dominion calculated the odds of victory and quietly withdrew their forces from the war, and the ancient Ithrol, who had not spoken publicly in 400 years, sent a single transmission to every species in the galaxy. "We warned you about the Primates. We told you they were dangerous. You did not listen, and now you will learn on the ground. Human Marines landed on every world where children were being held. They moved with terrifying efficiency, their black armor making them look like demons from an old nightmare, but they were not monsters. They did not kill civilians. They did not burn cities or destroy infrastructure. They came for their children and for the people who had taken them. Nothing more. Commander Sarah Webb led the assault on Research Station Theta 7, where her son Marcus was being held. She had been a teacher before the war, but 3 months of training had turned her into something else entirely. The station's guards tried to fight back, but they might as well have thrown rocks at a hurricane. Sarah found Marcus in a cold white room, strapped to a table surrounded by machines that had been probing his brain. He was unconscious but alive, and when she lifted him in her arms, tears ran down her face beneath her helmet. "I've got you, baby," she whispered. "Mommy's got you. You're safe now." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out over and over. Human parents reunited with their children. Human soldiers carrying small bodies out of laboratories and prisons and worse places. Not all the children survived. Some had died in the experiments. Others had been so badly damaged that they would never recover. The youngest victim was only 3 years old, a little girl who had been taken from her crib in the middle of the night when the soldiers found her body. Something changed in them. The cold efficiency became hot rage. And for a moment, the Council species glimpsed what humanity looked like when it truly lost control. But Admiral Drake gave orders that were obeyed even in the darkest moments. No massacres, no genocide, no revenge against the innocent. We are not them, he said again and again. We will never be them. We fight to protect, not to destroy. The war raged for 6 months, and in that time humanity shattered everything the Council had built. Their fleets were broken. Their economies collapsed. Their governments fell one by one. 17 species formally withdrew from the Council and begged humanity for mercy. 5 of them asked to be placed under human protection, preferring the mercy of their enemies to the chaos of their former allies. The Vorath hegemony lost 80% of its military capacity. Their homeworld was scarred with craters where cities had once stood. Their population lived in terror of the black ships that appeared without warning in their skies, and, still, it was not over. High Arbiter Kethvalium refused to surrender. He retreated to a hidden fortress on a moon at the edge of Vorath space, surrounded by his most loyal guards. Still believing that somehow he could win, he did not understand what he had awakened. He did not understand that humanity had spent 2,000 years preparing for exactly this moment, and he did not understand that the worst was yet to come. In her quarters aboard the TDS Vengeance, General Helena Vasquez stared at a photograph of her daughter, a beautiful girl with dark hair and her mother's smile. Her daughter had died in Vorath custody, not from experiments but from neglect. The aliens had simply forgotten to feed her properly. Helena's hand shook as she looked at the tactical display showing Kethval's homeworld. She had the power to destroy it completely, to kill every living thing on its surface, to make the Vorath pay for what they had done her. Finger moved toward the button that would end 2 billion lives. The choice was hers alone. General Helena Vasquez stood alone on the bridge of the TDS Vengeance, staring at the blue-green world that hung in the darkness before Hervorth Prime was beautiful from space. Its ocean sparkled in the light of its twin suns. Its clouds swirled in patterns that looked almost like art. 2 billion people lived on that world, going about their daily lives, raising their children, dreaming their dreams. Most of them had never heard of Resolution 7742. Most of them had no idea that their government had stolen 15,000 human children for experiments. Most of them were innocent. Helena did not care. Her daughter Maria had been 7 years old when the Vorath soldiers took her. She had been afraid of the dark and loved to draw pictures of flowers. She had wanted to be a doctor when she grew up so she could help people who were sick. Maria died alone in a cold cell because nobody bothered to give her enough food. She weighed 32 pounds when human soldiers finally found her body. Half of what a healthy 7-year-old should weigh. Helena had not cried when she received the news. Something inside her had broken, and the pieces had rearranged themselves into something hard and sharp and hungry for revenge. Now she had the power to get that revenge. The vengeance carried enough firepower to sterilize an entire planet. One command from her would turn Vorath Prime into a lifeless rock, a monument to what happened when you harmed a human child. Her weapons officer stood at his console, waiting for orders. He was a young man named Thomas Chun, and his own nephew had been among the taken. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "targets are locked. Orbital bombardment is ready on your command." Helena's finger hovered over the authorization button in her mind. She could see Maria's face, hear her laughter, feel her small hand holding tight to Helena's fingers as they walked through the park near their home. She could also see the faces of the Vorath children down on that planet. Children who had done nothing wrong, who were just as innocent as Maria had been. What would Maria think if she could see what her mother was about to do? A communication screen flickered to life, and Admiral Drake's weathered face appeared. "Helena," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I know what they took from you. I lost my granddaughter Emma in those same facilities. I understand the rage that burns inside you right now. Then you know why I have to do this." Helena replied, her voice flat and cold. "No," Drake said. "I know why you want to do this." "There is a difference." Helena's hand trembled above the button. "They killed her, Jonathan. They killed my baby girl because they were too lazy to feed her properly. They treated her like garbage, and you want me to show them mercy?" Drake was quiet for a long moment. "Do you remember why we became soldiers, Helena?" he asked finally. "Do you remember what we swore to protect?" "I remember everything. We swore to protect the innocent," Drake said. "Not just human innocence, but all innocence. That oath does not have an exception for revenge. That oath does not change because we are angry." Helena closed her eyes, and tears finally began to fall down her cheeks. "It hurts so much," she whispered. "I know," Drake replied. "But if you push that button, the pain will not go away. It will only grow. You will see Maria's face every time you look in the mirror, and you will wonder if she would be proud of what you became." The bridge was silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Helena thought about her daughter's smile, about the way Maria used to sing made-up songs while she colored her pictures, about the last words she had said before the soldiers came. "Good night, Mommy. I love you to the moon and back." Maria had been kind. Maria had been gentle. Maria had cried when she accidentally stepped on a bug in the garden. Maria would never have wanted this. Helena pulled her hand back from the button. "All weapon stations," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Target military installations only. Civilian centers are off limits. We are not them. We will never be them." Officer Chun nodded, and she could see relief in his eyes, mixed with something that looked like pride. The Vengeance opened fire, and the military bases on Vorath Prime began to burn. Defense platforms fell from the sky. Weapons factories collapsed into rubble. The war machine that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years was being torn apart piece by piece, but the cities survived. The hospitals and schools and homes full of sleeping children remained untouched when High Arbiter HFY emerged from his hidden fortress to see what remained of his military power. He found nothing but ashes and defeat. His soldiers were dead or captured. His ships were floating wreckage. His empire was broken beyond repair. Human Marines found him hiding in a basement, clutching ancient documents that he claimed gave him legal authority to do what he had done. Commander Sarah Webb was the one who put the restraints on his wrists. "You cannot do this," HFY hissed, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "I am the High Arbiter. I am protected by galactic law." Sarah leaned close to his face, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Your laws allowed you to steal children. Your laws said it was acceptable to experiment on babies. Your laws let my son be tortured for months while I could do nothing to help him. She straightened up and stepped back. We do not recognize your laws anymore, she said. From now on, there is only one law that matters. You do not harm children. You do not harm the innocent. And if you do, you answer to us. Keth Volume was taken to a transport ship along with the 47 other officials who had voted for Resolution 7742. They would face trial for what they had done. A fair trial with evidence and witnesses and a chance to defend themselves. Humanity would give them the justice they had denied to 15,000 children in the aftermath of the battle. General Vasquez sat alone in her quarters. Holding Maria's photograph against her chest, she had not destroyed Varth Prime. She had chosen mercy instead of revenge. She had done what Maria would have wanted, but the pain was still there. A hole in her heart that would never fully heal. A soft knock came at her door, and when she opened it, she found Admiral Drake standing in the corridor. I am proud of you. Helena, he said simply. She tried to respond, but the words would not come. Instead, she began to cry. Great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Drake stepped forward and held her as she wept. Saying nothing, just being there, outside the viewport, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant and eternal. They had witnessed countless wars and atrocities throughout their long existence. But perhaps they had also witnessed something rare today. They had witnessed a species choose to be better than its enemies. They had witnessed humans decide that mercy was not weakness, and perhaps, somewhere in the vastness of space, the souls of 15,000 children looked down and were at peace. The Treaty of Soul was signed exactly 1 year after the first child was taken. Representatives from every spacefaring species gathered on Earth in the Great Plaza outside the Terran Parliament building. The sky was clear and blue, and a gentle wind carried the scent of flowers from the gardens that surrounded the ancient structure. It was a beautiful day for the birth of a new era. The Galactic Council, as it had existed for 12,000 years, was officially dissolved. The alliance that had ruled the stars with arrogance and cruelty was gone forever. Swept away by the fury of a species that had been pushed too far, in its place rose the Terran Accord. Humanity did not demand worship or tribute or submission. They did not install themselves as emperors of the galaxy. They did not seek revenge against species that had stood aside. While their children were taken, they demanded only 3 things: transparency in government, accountability for crimes, and the absolute protection of the innocent. Any species that agreed to these principles was welcome to join the Accord. Any species that refused would be left alone, but watched. Carefully, most chose to join High Arbiter Keth Volume, and the 47 officials who had voted for Resolution 7742 were tried before a joint tribunal of human and alien judges. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and their guilt was never in question, but the sentence surprised everyone. They were not executed. Humanity had promised itself that it would not become what it fought against, and that promise was kept instead. Keth Volume and his co-conspirators were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives working in orphanages across the galaxy, caring for the children of species that had been devastated by wars they themselves had started over the centuries. They would change diapers and prepare meals and comfort crying babies in the middle of the night. They would learn what it meant to protect the helpless instead of exploiting them. Many thought it was too merciful. Many thought it was not enough to balance the scales of justice, but the children who had been taken were asked what they wanted. And they did not ask for death or torture or revenge. Make them understand, young Marcus Webb said at the tribunal, standing straight and brave despite everything he had suffered. Make them see what they did wrong. Killing them would be easy, but making them better would be hard. The judges listened to him. And the sentence stood Ambassador Lyra Chun, who had once presented tribute to uncaring alien masters, was chosen to lead the new accord as humanity's first galactic arbiter She stood on the steps of the Parliament building, addressing the gathered representatives of 100 species. Behind her, recovered children from 47 worlds stood in the warm sunlight, their faces turned toward the sky. "For 2,000 years, we played by your rules," Lyra said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We believed in your peace. We trusted your institutions. We did everything you asked of us, and we asked only to be treated with basic decency in return." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the alien delegates. "You repaid that trust by taking what was most precious to us. You stole our children in the night and called it legal. You tortured them in laboratories and called it science. You let them die alone and afraid and called it acceptable." Her voice grew harder, colder. "The old galaxy is gone. The one that rises in its place will be built on a simple truth that should never have needed to be spoken. Every child of every species is sacred. Their lives are not resources to be exploited. Their bodies are not property to be claimed. Their futures are not experiments to be conducted." She raised her hand and pointed at the assembled representatives. "Break that covenant, and you will not face our diplomats. You will not face our merchants. You will not face our scientists or teachers or philosophers. You will face what sleeps in every human heart. The thing we spent 2,000 years trying to bury." Lyra smiled, and there was something ancient and dangerous in that smile. "Pray you never wake it again." The treaty was signed, and the new era began in the years that followed. The galaxy changed in ways that would have seemed impossible before, when the Drexy Confederation attempted to enslave the primitive hollows of Kepler 442b. A human battle group arrived within hours and made it very clear that such behavior would not be tolerated when the merchant princes of Ethon were discovered trafficking in sentient beings. Their entire trade network was dismantled overnight when a famine struck the outer colonies of the Synth Dominion. Human aid ships were the first to arrive with food and medicine. Humanity became the galaxy's conscience, not because they believed themselves better than other species, but because they remembered what it felt like to be powerless. They remembered the terror of watching their children disappear. They remembered the cold silence of a galaxy that did not care. They would not allow that silence to fall again. Admiral Jonathan Drake retired to New Helsinki, to the very colony where his granddaughter Emma had been taken. He spent his remaining years building playgrounds and coaching youth sports teams, surrounded by laughing children who reminded him every day of what he had fought for. Emma, now 17 and enrolled in the Terran Academy, visited him every summer. She was studying to become a diplomat, wanting to build bridges between species the way Lyra Chen had done one evening. As they sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the snowy mountains in shades of gold and pink, Emma asked him a question that she had been carrying for a long time. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "were we the good guys?" Drake was silent for a moment. Looking out at the world he had helped to save, he thought about the cities that had burned on Varth Prime, about the soldiers who had died on both sides, about the children who had not survived long enough to be rescued. He thought about General Vasquez, holding her finger over the button that would have killed 2 billion people, and the choice she had made to pull back. He thought about Keth Volume, now old and broken, spending his days caring for orphans and perhaps beginning to understand the weight of what he had done. He thought about all the moments when humanity could have become monsters and chose not to. "We were human," he said finally, pulling Emma close. "We made mistakes. We almost went too far more than once. We did things that will haunt us forever." He paused, watching the last light fade from the sky. "But when it mattered most, we remembered who we wanted to be. We chose mercy when revenge would have been easier. We chose justice when genocide would have been faster. We chose to protect rather than destroy." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. "Is that enough?" she asked. Drake thought about the children playing in the streets below, human and alien together, chasing each other through the snow without fear. He thought about the galaxy his granddaughter would inherit, imperfect but healing, scarred but hopeful. "It has to be," he said softly, because that is what makes us human. Not our strength or our technology or our capacity for destruction. It is our ability to look into the darkness and choose to be light. Emma smiled. And in that smile, Drake saw everything worth fighting for above them. The stars came out one by one, and for the first time in a long time, they did not seem cold or distant or threatening. They seemed like a promise. Like countless worlds full of children who would grow up safe because humanity had decided to stand guard. The war was over. The healing had begun, and somewhere in the vastness of space, the spirits of 15,000 children rested peacefully, knowing that their sacrifice had changed the universe forever. They were not forgotten, they would never be forgotten, and in their memory, humanity would watch over the stars for as long as stars continued to shine.